Earlier this week, Caroline Packard and I shared that reel about how flatter feet or feet that like to roll inwards can affect things up the chain and what that means for your hip and what that means for your pelvic floor. And so along the lines of that same conversation, I would like to add that flatter feet usually have more mobility and less strength. And this is the foot themselves. The calves can still be tight. And so flatter feet often need more strengthening, and they might need more calf mobility. So you can always have the exception. You might have higher arched feet that like to roll in, or you might have flatter feet that like to roll out. But usually the opposite is true. Flatter feet are rolling in and have more mobility, and we need to strengthen them like the ideas in today's reel. Or higher arched feet usually like to roll in and they need more mobility. So after this story, I'm going to share a previous post that I did on foot mobility. But if you don't follow the quote-unquote norms, then go by what you find. If you have a high arched foot that rolls in, then you want to adapt to making sure that you have the ability to roll in and roll out. You might need to address your rolling out more. So address what you find. If you have flatter feet that don't have good mobility, then address the mobility, even though that's not the quote-unquote norm. So pay attention to how the pattern works, but also to what yours actually does.
I can feel it. Oh, it's like the stars align. I can feel it. Tonight's the night I come alive.
Today's post is inspired by the questions I get when you're frustrated about why you're not seeing improvement despite the fact that you feel like you're doing all of the things. So thinking like, what are some common places people make mistakes that they wouldn't think of? Even though you're doing it with the best of intentions of trying to align your ribs over your pelvic floor, it can be easy to do that in the wrong way and not connect the breath. But also the fact that I chose not a core-specific movement because I also want you to start to think, what other movements or exercises could you be doing that aren't core-specific that maybe you're not as diligent about what's happening at your core during? Because sometimes I think everybody just hyper-focuses on the core exercises themselves, but what's happening in these other loaded exercises that you could be doing that you should hone in on. I got questions yesterday on what is the connection with breastfeeding in your pelvic floor. So breastfeeding is associated with decreased estrogen. Decreased estrogen is typically associated with less tensile strength of tissues like the muscles or the ligaments. And so that would be another consideration that would go into your checklist of whether you're ready to go back. If your pelvic floor is still weak, if it hasn't been at least 3 months, if you haven't done the stuff to get to a place where single leg support and those forces are a good idea, you're just adding one more thing onto the list of potential downsides of running too soon, or disposing yourself to stress incontinence or prolapse because those tissues are just going to be structurally not as strong for an activity like that. I also had alluded to some studies that looked at intra-abdominal pressure measured vaginally during different movements, and we'll share a couple screen grabs as well as the citations for those because somebody had asked to see what the other movements are. But the point is, sit-ups are characteristically demonized as something you shouldn't do because they increase intra-abdominal pressure significantly, and most people have a hard time doing them. This is true. It's a true statement. They also found variabilities in the pressure, like some people can do them good, some people struggle. They found the same thing with down dog and yoga, like the same high pressures and very low pressures. So just a huge gradient between people, which just means it depends on the person, it depends on the form and the technique. So instead of saying this type of movement is bad, this is good, we need to say this is the better way to do it and incorporate your core.